Subscribe and hit that bell icon to be notified about the highlights of India's smartest podcast, The Ranveer Show. This is TRS Clips. You said something earlier on in this podcast about how America possibly could have funded the terror attacks that India saw in the 80s and 90s. We know that the terror attacks were funded by Pakistan. Pakistan is not an economic superpower or to be able to have the money to execute such large-scale attacks. They were getting the money from somewhere. At that stage in the 80s and 90s, most of the money...
US.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what was the US's intentions for orchestrating terror attacks in India?
So it's like this. I think it was in 1979 that the USSR's invasion of Afghanistan happened. Now that was an expansion of the sphere of influence of the enemy nation for the US. So what they did was they started this terrorist training program, Mujahideen training program in Pakistan. They provided all unlimited funds to Zia-ul Haq to start these Mujahideen factories, and they also provided unlimited weaponry. And the idea was to wage a proxy war against the USSR in Afghanistan. And that's something that went on for the best part of a decade. Eventually, the USSR was forced to withdraw. So the American strategy worked. Now, once the USSR withdrew, what happened is that Afghanistan came under the Pakistani influence completely. That's firstly. There was this Northern Alliance, there were these coalition governments, they were there for some time. But the Pakistanis had created this massive Mujahideen factory, including the Taliban. The Taliban was created during the time of Benazir Bhutto in the 90s. That was the beginning of the Taliban. So once the Afghanistan civil war ended, these Mujahideens, they were like out of work. There was only one work they knew, fighting. So then they were diverted into Kashmir. There is the price the Pakistanis extracted from the US. We did this for you, now you're going to do this for us. So, and even while the Afghanistan conflict was going on, there was this insurgency going on, terrorism going on in Kashmir, across the border. All of that money was being sent by the US. All the money, the training, the arms, ammunition, everything. And once the Afghanistan thing got settled, all of that was poured into Kashmir. There was, I think, 1989 or something, when suddenly there's this explosion of terrorism in Kashmir. So that is when the Kashmiri Hindus, the Kashmiri Pandits were forced out of Kashmir. So that was all, whether we like it or not, there is no other way to say it. It was all funded and financed by the US.
If you read the book Sapiens, you understand how religion can be used to manipulate people on either side. I'm not talking about one religion in particular, but any religion can be used against you. Your religion can be used against you. Because for you, it's a sense of faith, it's a sense of belonging and identity. But anything that you give that much emotional importance to also becomes your point of weakness. And someone can arm twist you and make you do things that you would have not normally done. That's just how the nature of power and the nature of history is. That especially when it comes to divide and rule policies, people will catch you by the balls and make you do what they want. Like make you their puppet. So in a way, what you're indirectly saying here, sir, is that everything we've seen in Kashmir over the last 20 years, 30 years, all these Indian military folks, the Indian military personnel who have been giving their life up for the situation in Kashmir, somewhere it's caused because of Big Daddy America.
Yes.
And Big Daddy America's geopolitical interests.
The Pakistanis used the Americans, and the Americans knew what was happening. They did not care about India. The thing is, initially the Americans had tried to woo India during the time of Mr. Nehru. They had offered India nuclear technology and much more. They had offered India a permanent seat in the UN Security Council.
To make us a bro in their Cold War.
To make us a bro in their Cold War. Obviously, they will have their own benefit in mind, but that's what they had offered India. Mr. Nehru said no, multiple times. Then the US turned to Pakistan and they just turned their backs on India. And then they started seeing India as a geopolitical and long-term adversary because India went into the lap of the USSR through Mr. Nehru. That's what happened.
Why did Nehru side with USSR?
It's strange, isn't it? Mr. Nehru was an Anglophile. He loved the British culture and all that. He was a lover of the English language and all. And yet he sided with the USSR, not the English-speaking world. It's because he was a Fabian socialist. That was his ideology. That's what he learned and absorbed during his years in England. There is this society in England called the Fabian Socialist Society. It is a certain form of socialism which believes in very slow, gradual change. No revolutions, no big reforms. Let change happen very slowly. That's called the Nehruvian rate of growth of the Indian economy, 2% per year. So Mr. Nehru sided with the USSR instead of the US. Then the US started seeing India as the adversary. They started funding and financing Pakistan. And they were okay to see India bleed. They had made many other countries bleed. So they were fine with that. And then the Pakistanis also, the only thing that keeps alive the legitimacy of the Pakistani army and ISI is this threat from India. The Pakistani army claims that India is an existential threat for Pakistan, even though India has never started a single war with Pakistan. But that's the only thing that keeps them in power. That's what gives them legitimacy in the eyes of the people. The moment that legitimacy goes away, the people will rise up against them. So they keep this threat of India alive. And that's how they're able to keep this going. So if you keep the Kashmir terrorism alive, then India will be upset, unhappy, and there will be this tension, constant tension, which keeps the role of the Pakistani army paramount in Pakistan, more than the Prime Minister and the government. So that's what they have always been doing. So now that Big Daddy US is gone, they have Big Daddy Xi Jinping for now. Maybe in the future they'll go back to the US. Who knows what will happen? So that's what they play. That's the game they play.
Hard-hitting question. Could there ever be a Big Daddy India for Pakistan?
When India has sufficient money, even I used to wonder, why doesn't India buy Pakistan out? You buy the generals out, they'll move. The reason why this has never happened is that there are certain people who can always go beyond our offer.
As in?
As in, let's say I offer the Pakistani generals $1 billion. China can double that anytime they want. If I offer 2 billion, they will offer 4 billion. They can. It's like the game in when you are bidding for something, and people are putting up their bids, and then you announce that whoever bids the highest, I'm going to double it. That's it. End of story. So then you buy the item, right? So that sort of thing. The Pakistani generals and dictators are for sale, but India doesn't have the deepest pockets. There is a bigger guy out there. There are two big guys out there, the US and China, who have deeper pockets than India, and that's why the Pakistanis always go towards those two quarters. The moment India becomes bigger than China, let's say hypothetically, that's when we can buy Pakistan out.